Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, what you're looking at right now is a camel that has dropped dead. It dropped dead due to thirst. This camel is from a region called Cholestan in Pakistan. It's a desert that's been struck by a drought. It's excessively hot right now and the water has not come. And the animals are dropping like this all over. What you have to understand about this place, that it is a community that lives off the cattle, they live off the animals. When the animals start dying, know that the humans are going to start dying next. The way these animals are dropping on the streets out of thirst, they're dropping dead. Humans will start dropping dead like this very, very shortly if they do not get the aid and the help with the permission of Allah. We're currently raising funds on behalf of Humanity Care Relief to set up filtration plants so that this community can get water for their animals and for themselves to drink from and to do tahara from, to do wudu and ghusl from. These children here mentioned this animal died of thirst because it had no decent water to drink. Please, I ask you to donate as generously as you can for Allah's sake, the link below, so we can make a change for these people's lives in the long term. And I ask you to do this quickly before you watch the video. Just pause, make that donation, and then carry on watching, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Brothers and sisters, today is a big day. Today is a big day in our fiqh class, and today is also a big day in our 9 names of Allah class. It's a big day in our fiqh class because today we're going to study the menstrual cycle. And the reason why this is big is because this is one of the most complicated issues in fiqh. There are 4 chapters that the scholars say are the most complicated chapters in fiqh when you study. Anyone know what they are?
Menses.
The menses.
Tayammum.
Tayammum. It's tough, but there's some ones that scholars say is more so. So the menses, tayammum, sajd sahu, so the sajda of forgetfulness, and the last one, divorce. These 4, complicated. So today, inshallah ta'ala, and the reason why the menses one is so important, because it's different to like tayammum and divorce. Like women need to know this. They need to know this. Does that make sense? Because they need to know this for every day they pray. Like, as in, they have to know this for the salah. Does that make sense? So inshallah ta'ala, the sisters, we have a Google Classroom for you. Those of you who are new or may have not signed up, I need you to really be interactive in this lesson, inshallah ta'ala. I need to be really interactive in this lesson because I want to make sure you're understanding. Does that make sense? And I'll look at the questions, majority of them at the end. Then in the 9 names of Allah Azza wa Jalla class, we've got a big lesson as well because we're going through Allah's name, Al-Wahidul Ahad. The name, the one and only. The one and the one and only. And this is the name that the characteristic of Wahdaniyya, the term that we use, Tawheed, it comes from this. So these are 2 big lessons. Periods and Tawheed. It's big wallahi. If only you guys knew. But the good thing for you guys here is that I have spent so much time, and this is one of the reasons I'm late. It's just trying to summarize it so you guys understand it. So hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, either you're going to be like, brother, I do not get it. I do not get it. Or you're going to say, you know what? Good job, sir. Good job. Anyways, inshallah ta'ala, can I just get a test from the sisters on the Google Classroom to ensure that the Google Classroom is working? I just need sisters to just drop a comment or something just so we know that it's working. Bi'idhnillah, that it's working, that the sisters are present, that they are live. Does that make sense? They are with us. Can we get that, please? Can you just send a message? Can't see anything. Okay, if that's the case, then qadar Allahu ma shaa fa'al. At least the brothers will learn how to handle the blood. Yeah? Inshallah. None of you lot should be bleeding, yeah? It's just for when you have wife, children, parents, mothers, whatnot, so you can show them. But I really would like the sisters to be engaging in this lesson. Okay, so the menstrual cycle. First and foremost, the blood that comes out of the woman's private part, her front private part, there are 3 types of blood that come out of her private part. Write them down. And there's not a 4th. All of the different types of blood that come out of a private part are 3. And each one has a specific hukum, specific ruling. You deal with it different to the other one. Does that make sense? The first type is al-hayd, which is the period blood. It's called hayd. It's called damul hayd, period blood. The second type is called damun nifas. It's the blood that comes out after she had a baby. You know, when women have had a baby, they bleed. They bleed. It's called post-natal bleeding. It's called post-natal bleeding. And the third type is called al-istihada. Al-istihada is bleeding which is not period blood, nor is it post-natal bleeding. It's just irregular bleeding. It's just irregular bleeding. Some women bleed out of their front private part irregularly. What do we mean by irregularly? She will bleed outside of her period. Does that make sense? She will bleed outside of her period. So for example, her period starts at the beginning of the month. Her period is ended. Then a week later, she starts bleeding again. What do we do? Can she pray with that blood? Is it like period blood? We're going to answer these questions, inshallah ta'ala. But for now, you have to understand how many types of blood are there that a woman bleeds, that comes out of a woman? 3. The first one is called damul hayd. It's called what? Damul hayd. The blood which is of her period, the period blood. Dam means blood, al-hayd means period. Does that mean menses, right? The second type is damun nifas, the blood that comes out after she had a baby. After she had a baby, she will bleed. This is called damun nifas. And nifas. The third type is called al-istihada. Al-istihada, which is the irregular bleeding that a woman would have between her periods. Does that make sense? She would have this bleeding. She may even have this irregular bleeding. It's just irregular bleeding. Does that make sense? Irregular bleeding. You guys get that, yeah? First off, let's start with the period, which is the one we'll speak the most about today. The one we'll speak the most about today. Before we go into the rulings, I just want to mention a few things. When a woman has a period, is this a punishment for the woman? Or is it a mercy? In Christianity, they believe Allah punished women by giving them periods. They believe that Eve, Hawa, salamun alayha, she tempted Adam to eat from the fruit, so Allah punished her and all of the women after by making them bleed regularly every month. Does that make sense? And things like bleeding and carrying baby and the pain of childbirth is, according to them, a punishment for women. This is Christianity. This is falsehood. We don't believe this. Does that make sense? Rather, connected to the period is rahmah, mercy from Allah Azza wa Jal. How is it mercy? Because that whole cycle is a cycle that Allah Azza wa Jal put in place for her to be able to have children. Does that make sense? It's that cycle that is a cycle Allah Azza wa Jal put into place for her to be able to have children. Not just that, Allah has so much mercy on the woman connected to her menses that Allah Azza wa Jal told her, don't pray and don't fast during that time. Even if she says, no, I can. No, it's haram for you to do so. Ibn al-Qayyim took a beautiful fa'idah. He said, Allah Azza wa Jal, He wanted to make things easy for the woman on her period. Because the period is not easy for a woman. There's pain involved. Her hormones are also very irregular. Brothers who are married will be able to tell you that a woman, when she's on her menses, some women's hormone levels are very, 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 they're different when the menses come. And although that's not an excuse for women to act out, because some women use that as an excuse. I'm on my period. So she might shout and scream and swear and be abusive and be rude. I'm on my period. As if to say, put up with it. No. No. That's not an excuse for you to sin. That's not an excuse for you to act out, sister. But if it happens, the man should be like, she's got something inside of her that is what? that is affecting her moods, sometimes quite drastically. There's also pain involved. And sometimes it can be very discomforting, the pain. All of these factors in place. Ibn al-Qayyim said Allah had mercy on the woman. He said, take a break. From what? Ibadah. Which ibadah? As-salah. The greatest act of worship after the shahada, after Tawheed, after the affirmation of Tawheed. Allah's going to take a break from that. The first thing you'll be asked about on the day of judgment, Allah's take a break from that. So then this is a reminder to the husbands and the fathers and the brothers. If Allah can give your women a break from His right, maybe you should also cut the woman some slack when she's on her menses as well. If Allah can give her a break, then why can't you and I? Sisters, that is not an excuse for you to sin and be rude and disrespectful when you're on your menses. No. But it's something for the men to consider, that sometimes maybe you might let it slide. You might take it a bit easy. You might give her a bit of a break when she's going through that. Does that make sense? Because Allah who's greater than you, whose right is greater than yours, He did what? He cut the woman what? He cut her some slack. Do you see? So that is the Islamic perspective on the periods. And by the way, she gets rewarded for the salah as if she prayed it. So she doesn't miss out on the ajr. The fasting she has to make up, as we'll talk about. I also want to mention another point, which is, introductory points before we get into the rulings. Some things that women should just be concerned about when it comes to the period. When a woman's on her period, her iman will naturally decrease a bit. And this is how the scholars understood the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ said, نَاقِصَاتُ عَقْلٍ وَدِينًا كَمَا قَالَ. The women have a deficiency with regards to their religion. Because obviously when the period is on, there are many religious practices that she cannot do. Does that make sense? She cannot do. So obviously that has an impact on her iman. Because we know al-imanu yazidu bi-ta'ah. Iman, it increases with obedience. وَيَنْقُصْ بِالْمَعْصِيَةِ أو مَعَاصِي. Iman goes up with ta'at, obedience, and it goes down when you disobey Allah. So if a woman's not obeying Allah at that time through the salah, which is a great action that really boosts the iman every time you pray it, then of course her iman is going to maybe plateau, right? And remember, if you're not growing, if you're not progressing, you're regressing. Iman doesn't just stay still. Remember this, brothers and sisters. If a day goes by and you didn't do much good deeds, your iman didn't just stay still. It's moving. It's going up or down. Does that make sense? So if a woman is not doing salah, her iman, it's hit a roof. It's hit a roof. So what should she do now? Do other deeds at that time to compensate for her not praying. So at that time she might do what? She might do a lot more Quran. She might read a lot more Quran. She might do what? And the safest would be to not do it from the mushaf, maybe from her phone or something. She might do a lot of dua, a lot of dhikr. She might take that time to do charity. She might take that time focusing on family ties. She might take that time what? Maybe doing some da'wah, reaching out to some sisters, maybe giving them some nasiha. Spend that time seeking knowledge. Maybe that time she should really spend it seeking knowledge, revising her notes, doing a lot of dhikr. Astaghfirullah, Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah. It doesn't mean that she should just take a break. I'm not praying, so let me not do anything. No, but do something. Otherwise your iman will be affected. It will be affected. Does that make sense? So don't just leave it there now. Don't just be like, okay, I'm on my period, I'm not praying, let me just relax and stop all acts of obedience until I come on to it again. No, because what's going to happen is that once a month, you're going to be hit with the deficiency in your iman. And every time you're growing, your iman's growing, the period brings it back down again. So you should always have a constant state of worship and ibadat and obedience during your menses. So that what? Your iman's growing because you're praying salah and you're fasting. Oh wait, you can't pray in salah, but your iman's still growing because now you're doing dhikr, dua, seeking knowledge. So your iman's always growing. Does that make sense? It's very important. And pay attention, sisters. One of the times when, a lot of things like sihr, magic, and evil eye, and jinn possession. These type of things can happen is when a woman is on her menses. Because when she's on her menses, she's not in a state of wudu, she's not in a state of tahara, maybe her iman's decreasing, she's not doing a lot of ibadat, so her iman is being impacted. So her fortress is weak during her menses. So a lot of women complain about being afflicted by these kind of things during those times. Do you see? So be conscious. So my introductory points are what? Number one, that this is a break Allah has given to the wife. So then the husband should give her a break as well. But that doesn't mean that's an excuse for her to sin. The second thing is that during this time, sisters, understand that there's an impact on your iman. So compensate it with some other acts of worship. So that you're not just completely at a plateau. Some women, they're on their deen 3 weeks. That 1 week, apart from the fact that she covers and says, Salaam alaikum, mashallah, inshallah, there's not much obedience in her life. So what happened? No, there must always be something. Listening to the Quran, reading the Quran, studying, seeking His dhikr. These two things are very important. Yes, Akhi.
If a sister's on her menses,
Yeah.
she's on a state of Hadath al-Akbar.
Hadath al-Akbar, na'am.
But you said in that state we can't recite Quran. Or is it only in the state of Janaba?
We're going to come to it. We're going to come to it, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to come to it. So, we're going to come to it today, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to come to it today. Sisters are not around today. I just need someone to send a test. Like, do you exist today, sisters? This is your day. This is for you. Okay. Now, should we go into it? Okay. Before I explain the rulings to you, which I'm going to try my best to oversimplify so that you do not feel distressed. I need to let you know how distressing this topic really is. Imam Ahmad said, I spent 9 years trying to understand the woman's period. And the rulings connected to it. 9 years. And wallahi, it's true, man. This is hard. The same way trying to understand a woman's, women's character sometimes is hard. Like men can't catch it. And I'm sure women say the same about us. I'm sure they are not able to understand men, right? Men, honestly, it's very hard to just understand women. It's just very hard. The same is very hard to understand the men. It's very hard. So the scholars, they said, the same way Allah Azza wa Jal tested the women with the period, Allah tested the men with understanding it. Allah tested the men with understanding it. And by the way, some people, they belittle the ulama for talking about this topic. Some people, they belittle the ulama. I have to mention this side point. Because when you go to the ulama, they spend a lot of time talking about tahara and salah and all of these topics, right? Some people, they belittle the ulama. Look at you always talking about this, women's tahara issues. For example, there was the Mu'tazili, Wasim ibn Ata. Wasim ibn Ata, who was one of the heads of the Mu'tazila. It was either him or Amr ibn Ubayd, both of them were the heads of the Mu'tazila. They said, these imams like Abu Hanifa and these guys, all day and every day, their speech revolves around the waist garment of the woman. What do they mean by that? The waist garment of the woman. They're talking about her bleeding, her period, her menses, and this and that, and whatever have you. This statement can reach kufr, you know that, right? To insult the scholars for talking about what? The rulings connected to the sharia that Allah legislated. Do you see? Why would the scholars not talk about the thing that affects every Muslim? Some people get upset. Why are the scholars not talking about what's happening with regards to the Muslims that are, for example, in China? For example, someone might say that. Why are the scholars not talking about what's happening to the Muslims that are happening in Kashmir? And although these are important topics, and they should be addressed, and there are people that are pleased to address these issues. Does that make sense? What you do have to understand at the same time is that these are not issues that affect the entirety of the Ummah. So does it not make sense that the scholars would more so be talking about that which affects every single Muslim, as opposed to that which affects a group of the Muslims? That's not belittling it. That's just a matter of fact. Right? What point is there for you to be out there defending the Muslims that are suffering if you yourself don't know how to pray? So the things that they're going to talk to you about are what? Salah. They can talk about zakat, about tahara, about siyam, about these things. It's sad, you will find a brother with a beard, maybe even 6 fists long, that beard. And he doesn't know zakat. He maybe hasn't paid zakat properly on time once his whole life. As you're going to see, inshallah ta'ala, when we come to zakat. So these are things that are very important. And you don't belittle the ulama for these things. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, was he fake? Was Imam Ahmad scared of the rulers? Was he scared? Was he a scholar for dollar? But why did he say I spent 9 years on this topic? Because it's important. We talk about Imam Ahmad was the one who spoke the statement of truth and this, that, whatever have you, and he got lashed and the rulers took him in, they imprisoned him. But he spent 9 years talking about this. Abu Hanifa, he got arrested and he got put in prison. But look how long he spent speaking about it, about the women's menses, to the point where the Mu'tazila accused him of this. Now we say Abu Hanifa was a real scholar because he got arrested. You know, people have this fake principle that they put in their mind, that if a scholar's not arrested, he can't be a real scholar. I don't know where they got this from. But okay, Ahmad got arrested, and Abu Hanifa got arrested, and Shaafi'iy got arrested, and Imam Malik, and all of them spent a lot of time talking about these masail. In fact, they spoke about these perhaps more than other masail that you go on about all day, every day. So this is not something small. These are big issues. This is ilm. This is our deen. Does that make sense? This is al-ilm, brothers and sisters. This is knowledge. Okay, now let's go into it, inshallah. Bismillah, bismillah, bismillah. Ya Allah, help us today. Ameen. So, I don't want to be too complicated with the definitions. I don't want to confuse you with too many things. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. The next stage is when we'll get specific with definitions and things like that. So what is a period? Generally speaking, period is generally speaking, period blood. It is thicker than normal blood. And it's redder than normal blood, to the point where it's very dark, closer towards black than it is red. So it's thick and it's dark, darker than normal red, closer towards black. Not black, not red, but between it. So it's darker. And it's also what? It also has a smell that is different to normal blood. So these are characteristics. It's thicker than normal blood. It's darker, red, darker than the normal blood. And it smells differently to normal blood. And the fourth characteristic is that it is a sign of good health. If a woman has a period, she's healthy. It's a good sign. It's a what? It's a good sign. Okay, good. Women, generally speaking, they know what their period is. They know it. They know it. They don't need, for us to tell them the color, the shade. They know. When they're on their period, they know. There are some women who their period is what? Their period is what? Their period, they can't tell. It looks like normal blood. It smells like normal blood. And the texture, the thickness, is as thick as normal blood. These women, she's called mutahayyira. Mutahayyira. As in, do you understand the point here? There's period blood, and it has unique characteristics. And most women know, this is my period. Other women, they don't know. They're like, no, my blood looks like, if you cut my finger, it's the same. It doesn't look what? It doesn't look what? Any darker than normal blood. It doesn't have a different smell, and it doesn't what? Have a different texture. It's the same. Like, as in, I can't tell the difference. This, we're not talking about today. This woman is called mutahayyira. She's called a mutahayyira. Mutahayyira literally means the confusing one. And the scholars called her mutahayyira because she is one التي حيرت العلماء. She confused the scholars. She confused the scholars. Does that make sense? And by the way, when you look at the way the scholars dealt with her problem, you will see the depth of the knowledge of the ulama. For example, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala in his Kitab al-Majmu', he goes into this issue. Wallahi, the way he breaks it down. The way he breaks it down. Because the thing with women is that most women have a normal period. Most women have a normal structure to their menses. But in some women, it's every time you say something, she's like, no, but mine's not like that. And then you tell her, okay, then do this. Mine's not like that. Does that make sense? Now, for example, what do you say to a woman who she can't tell the difference between the two bloods? You say to her, okay, but you know when your period starts and when it ends, right? As in, like, for example, you know that around about the 1st or the 2nd of every month is when that bleeding comes. Imagine she says to you, no, actually, I'm bleeding all month, irregularly. So what do you do in this situation? So the scholars, they dealt with it. But we're not going to talk about that today, inshallah ta'ala. We're not going to talk about that. That's when it gets confusing. We're going to talk about what? Just the sister, she knows her period. She knows it. Which is the most, about most women. Does that make sense? So it is a what? It is a bleeding, which is where the blood is thicker than usual blood, darker than usual blood. It has a different smell. And number 4, it's a sign of good health. Beautiful. At what age does the period start? It starts at the age of 9. What I mean by that is that it can start at the age of 9. Not that it necessarily does. Pay attention. If a girl starts bleeding and has this blood that appears to be period blood at the age of 8, is it considered menses? No. Until she reaches 9, any bleeding she has before is not considered period. It's not considered period blood. It's when she's 9 years old. If she reaches the age of 9, and then after the age of 9, she starts to bleed, we'll say period. If it has this characteristic. It may be irregular bleeding. If it's not period blood, it could just be irregular bleeding. She could have irregular bleeding at the age of 10, 11. That's not period. We're talking about period blood. It's darker, has a different smell, and it's thicker. Does that make sense? But this is all after the age of 9. Pay attention. 9 what? 9 lunar years. Brothers and sisters, be attentive to a very important fact. The ahkam of the Sharia revolve around the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar. And the lunar calendar, it has a big difference compared to the solar calendar. What do we mean by solar? We mean January, February, March, April. That's the lunar calendar. And the Islamic calendar months are what? They are the lunar calendar. What's the difference? Every year is a difference of 11 days. Every year there's a difference of 11 days. Ramadan happens based on the lunar calendar. Hajj happens based on the lunar calendar. These issues of the menses happen based on the lunar calendar. The one that gets people is the issues of zakat happen on the lunar calendar. One of the biggest mistakes people make is that they pay their zakat on a particular day of the year based on the solar calendar. See, for example, on the 1st of February, I pay my zakat. 10 years he's been doing that. 10 years later, he's paying his zakat 111 days late. And the ulama, they say, if your zakat was due in the morning and you paid it at night on that day, on the same day, you are now a sinner. Everyone must download. This is homework for you guys. Everyone. It seems like there are some sisters that are talking in the class and they are interrupting the students. If they can please not interrupt the students. If they cannot interrupt the sisters, please do not be disrespectful and do not be disruptive to the class. If you guys are talking and disrupting, do not do that, please. And I think that the thing is not working. Huh? It's working now, yeah? Okay, khair, inshallah. But can we not have any disruptions? And can the sisters please manage the disruptions? But please also be very polite and don't be like too tough with the people that are disrupting, but politely manage it in the sister section, okay? So what was I saying? You must download, for example, on an iPhone. I don't know how I did it, but one time I think I just went to the App Store and I typed in Hijri calendar, or I typed it in what? Or maybe I typed how to get the Islamic calendar on iPhone. Just Google it somehow. Now, for example, on my front display, it tells me Friday, 3rd of December, 27th of Rabi' al-Thani. So you should all have it on your phone. And we should live in accordance with this calendar, because this calendar is what? A lot of our life is connected to it. Our life is connected to this calendar. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So pay attention. The minimum age that the period can start is 9. If it starts before 9, we don't consider it period. Even if it looks like period, we don't care. She's not hit 9. Does that make sense? Good. Good. Okay, fantastic. What is the maximum age that a period can start at? There's no maximum age. It can start when she's 30. It can start when she's what? It may start when she's 50. It may start when she's 60. There's no maximum age. Does that make sense? Okay. What if a woman hasn't come on her period? and she's 30 years old, does that mean she hasn't hit puberty yet? Because hitting your period is a sign of hitting your puberty, or having your period is a sign of hitting puberty, right? So we know that the minimum age, if a woman has this period blood at the age of what? 7, has she hit puberty? No. When she has it at the age of 9 or above, has she hit puberty? Yes, okay. But is there a maximum age? We say there's no maximum age. A woman may have her period when she's 30. She may have her first period when she's 50. She may have her first period when she's 50. Right? Question, does that mean if she hasn't had a period up until the age of 50, does that mean she hasn't reached puberty until the age of 50? No, we look at the age of 15. If the age of 15 comes and she hasn't had her period, nor has she had a wet dream, then we will say she is now pubescent. She's reached puberty. Because for the woman, the 2 signs of puberty are what? Her period and having a wet dream. And for a boy, the 2 signs of puberty are what? Let me start again, sorry. For the woman, the signs of puberty are 3. Her period, a wet dream, or if she has had neither, reaching the age of 15. If she hit age of 15, she's hit puberty now. For the boy, the signs of puberty are 2. Either he has a wet dream after the age of 9. Or if he hasn't had a wet dream, he reaches the age of 15. We're going to say, you need to start praying everything, brother. You need to start, you're with us now. You're one of the lads. You're one of the lads. Does that make sense? He said, no, but my voice isn't broken yet. Look at how I'm talking. I said, I don't care. You reach 15. Lunar years, brother. Lunar years. Get in line. Do you understand? So then these are the signs of what? Puberty. Whether a woman's period happens after the age of 15 or not, we don't consider that with regards to puberty. She has reached puberty, even if she never had a period, when she hit the age of 15. Is this clear? Fantastic. Okay. Now the next question is, how long does the period last for? How long does a woman's period last for? Okay? When she has a period, how long does it last for? The minimum that the Shaafi'iy, they say, the minimum her period has to be is 24 hours. 1 day and 1 night. So she started bleeding, and then an hour later her bleeding stopped. An hour later her bleeding stopped. Can she do ghusl? The Shaafi'i, they say no. No. A whole 1 day and 1 night she has to be on her period. What? Do you understand? 1 day and 1 night. 1 day and 1 night. We don't base it on the hour. Do you see, guys? So this is the minimum her period has to be. It has to be 24 hours. Why do you look confused? There's a question in your mind. Her period has to be 24 hours. I know. You're thinking the same thing, isn't it? She has to wait 24 hours. Her period has to be for 24 hours. Her period cannot be less than 24 hours. I know exactly what you're asking, and I'm intentionally not going to go into it. That's in the next book. No, I know what you're asking. You're asking, does it have to flow for 24 hours?
That's what you're implying.
Just intentionally, I'm not answering it. We'll leave that for the next book, inshallah. Today's lesson is simple. So just understand that if sisters have it as a question in the Q&A, I'll answer it. But all intents and purposes for the lesson, just understand her period has to be for 24 hours. Has to be what? Has to be for 24 hours. If the women want to ask in the Q&A, we can go into it, inshallah ta'ala. But what you need to know is that the period has to be 24 hours, 1 day and 1 night. Do you understand?
Basically, she can't do ghusl, as in she's not allowed to do ghusl.
Yeah, she's not allowed to do ghusl. A period has to be for 1 day. 24 hours, yes. Sorry? What if they what? She has to wait 24 hours. It has to be 24 hours. She has to wait 24 hours. Yes? Okay, go on.
Say for example, she's had her menses, it's been 24 hours, and she thinks she's finished it, and she has.
We're coming to, inshallah. What's the longest her period can be? 15 days. 15 days. While she's bleeding, for 15 and a half days. The half day will say, no, sister, you're not on your period anymore. But she's like, I can see the blood. No, it's not period blood. But I see it. No, it doesn't matter if you can see it. Because we will say, this is now, what is this? If it's not period, what is it? Remember I told you there are 3 types of blood? This is the third one, istihaba. This is the irregular bleeding now. Sister, your period's too long now. 2 weeks? 15 days? You must now pray. Your period has now ended. But I'm still bleeding. That's not period blood anymore. In the Sharia, we now consider that irregular bleeding. Irregular bleeding. So then the minimum a woman's period can be is 1 day and 1 night, 24 hours. The longest that her period can be is 15. If her period is less than a day, we'll say, no, sister, your period is not over yet. It's not over yet. It's stopped bleeding. Don't worry, the blood is going to come. Just wait, it's going to come. Does that make sense? Or she says, I bled for 20 days. No, sister. The 15th was the last day. Go back and pray. Does that make sense? So then the minimum her period is what? 1 day and 1 night. The longest her period is what? 15 days. If she's bleeding after the 15 days, what do we say? This is not period bleeding. This is called irregular bleeding. Sister, go do your ghusl and pray. Go do your ghusl and pray. But what she must do is that every time she prays the salah, she just cleans the blood that is coming out of her, the irregular bleeding, and she does her wudu again and she prays. Remember we talked about, when we were talking about wudu, we talked about the conditions that were specific to the what? The one who's always in a state of hadith, because their wudu is always being broken. I told you it's a person who can't control wind, or he can't control urine, and I also said the woman who irregular bleeds comes under this. So all of those rulings apply. She has to do wudu, she has to pray a salah straight away. After she's done the wudu, she has to wait for the time of the salah to enter, etc. All of that applies. Okay? Good. Yes?
Is it 15 days or 15 days?
Yeah, 15 days, the whole thing. 15 complete days. Okay? Pay attention now. What is the majority of women's period? How long does it last? 6 to 7 days. That's the average. Most women average about 6 to 7 days. Now this is the juicy topic. The one that the sister's already interested about, and the one that you're interested about too, is when does the period start? When does it end? Okay, I need to know the sisters are engaged. I want sisters to message in the Google Classroom. Are you alive? Are you alive? Okay? Are you listening? By the way, any questions I see that are a bit long or off topic or maybe I miss, I'm going to revisit them again at the end of the class. Okay, sisters? But right now, just, are you here? Are you here? If you bleed for longer than 15 days, do you have to do ghusl every day? No. It's just that before every salah, you just clean the blood and do wudu. That's it. If you bleed for longer than 15 days. You only do the ghusl once at the end of the 15 days if you're still bleeding. Okay? Okay. Now this is the big one. How does a woman's period start? How does it end? Be very patient with me, guys, because I'm going to explain this in layers. And I know some sisters are going to be like, but that doesn't apply to me. Don't worry, I'm going to come to your layer. And if I go through all the layers and it doesn't apply to you, you're the confusing one. So we'll wait till the next book for you, inshallah. Or we'll address it in the Q&A. I don't mean that in a rude way, it's just, Imam Ahmed waited 9 years, so you can wait maybe a few days to get your answer. Okay, so. A woman's period starts when she sees the period blood. What's the period blood? It's known. It's known. The women, they know it. Generally speaking, they know it. Ah, wait, there's period blood. It's darker. It's thicker. Has a different smell. They know it. My period has started. That's when what? Her period ends. It starts. When does the period end? It ends in one of 2 ways. She either sees something called Qassatul Bayda. Qassatul Bayda is a white discharge. It's a white discharge. Sometimes it's white but slightly transparent, slightly clear. It's the same thing. It doesn't have any color. It doesn't have no yellow. It doesn't have no red. It doesn't have, understand this point, sisters. It doesn't have no yellow. It don't have no red. It don't have no brown. It's either white or it's clear. Translucent. It's translucent. It's something that comes at the end of her period. It comes at the end of her period. Allah says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ. If they come to the tuhur, if they have the tuhur, if the woman has the tuhur, now she can do the ghusl. Now she can do the ghusl. The tuhur, this is what? It's the qassatul bayda. It's the white discharge. It's either white, it's either abyad, or it's what? It's see-through. Like, it's not completely see-through, but it's like translucent, it's clear. That's the first way the period ends. The second way the period ends is by what? By having there's nothing coming out of her. It's complete dry. Complete dry. She might take a tissue, she might take some cotton, she places it at the point where the blood comes out from in her private part, and she notices there's nothing. There is nothing. It's completely gone. There's no discharge, no nothing, there's no blood, no red, no yellow, no brown, there's no white, and it's ended. These are the two ways that a woman's period comes to an end. Either through the qassatul bayda, the white or clear discharge, or through the absence of discharge. No blood, no nothing. There's what? Nothing. Okay, good. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, now let's go to the second layer. There's something called sufra and kudra. Sufra is a yellowish discharge, and kudra is a brownish kind of discharge. Does that make sense? Some of them is more brown than the other, some are more yellow than the other. The point is, it's not white and it's not red. It could be towards the yellow spectrum, it could be towards the brownish spectrum. It's not period color and it's not the tuhur color. It's not the end of the period color. It's either yellowish, some might say it's pinkish. It's in between the two. Does that make sense? Some women say, this happens to me just before my period starts. Some say it happens to them just before the white discharge comes. Some say it comes even after the white discharge comes. So how many situations are there? 3. We're going to address each one, inshallah ta'ala. The first situation is what? That she sees that kudra and the sufra. She sees the yellowish. She sees the yellowish, brownish discharge before the bleeding, before her menses. We say before the period, she's coming to a period. Literally the day before a period, she sees that starting to come out. She's like, whoa, what is this? I see some reddish stuff. I see some brownish, yellowish stuff. It's not blood. It's not fully period blood, but it's there. We will say, sister, this is not your period. We will say to her, sister, this is not your. A lot of women, when they see this, they stop praying. A lot of women, when they see this, they stop praying. They stop praying because they think this is their period. Before the period, if it comes out, notice I said before the period, if it comes out, there is not your period, sister. You carry on praying and you carry on fasting as normal. That's the first situation. The second situation is that it comes out before the qassatul bayda, before the white or clear discharge. If it comes up before the white or clear discharge, we say this is your period. Before the period, if it comes out, it's not period. Before the white discharge, it is your period. Why? Because now, anything between the bleeding and the white discharge is period. It came out what? It came out yellow. It came out what? It came out brown. It came out what? It came out pinkish. Wa alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. The point is that it came out before the what? Before what? Before the white discharge. So now we'll consider all of this as her period. We'll consider what? All of this as her as a period. The third situation is that it comes out after her period. Some women say, I got the white, I saw it. But then literally after the ghusl the next day, I saw some reddish, brownish discharge. We say, after the period has ended and you've seen the white, if you see that discharge, it's not period. عطية رضي الله تعالى عنها, she said, كنا لا نعد الكدر والصفرة بعد الطهر شيئا. She said, we would not consider that yellow discharge or any of that discharge that comes after the white discharge. We wouldn't consider anything. So let me summarize the three situations. Number one, the discharge, which is yellowish, brownish or whatever, it comes before the period. You can pray, this is not period blood. Okay, it comes after the period, but before the end of the period, i.e. the bleeding has stopped. As in you see a lot of blood, now it's slowed down. It's slowed down so much, you're not seeing the thick, lumpy, dark, reddish, thick blood. But you start to see this stuff come out now. Yellowish stuff, reddish stuff, brownish stuff. That is your period. It's still the same. Don't worry. It's still the same. Now the third situation is she sees the white or the clear. Does that make sense? And then after that, what happened? She done her ghusl and she saw it. That one we will say what? We'll say what? It's not your period. Some sisters get really stressed about the second one. The bleeding has stopped maybe on the 4th day. And for 5 days, 6 days, she's got what? The yellowish, brownish discharge coming out. She's saying 5, 6, 7 days, it's coming out, brother. What do I do in this situation? Sister, you're still on your period until you see the white. Until you see the white. Until you see the white. Or clear discharge. There's a hadith from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, the women, they used to what? They used to have like they used to send to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha on cotton the kudra and the sufra. As in because they wanted to know. So they used to say to Aisha, this is what has just come out of me. Can I do my ghusl? Can I pray now? And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she would say to the women, she would say, don't be hasty. لا تعجلنا. She would say, don't be hasty. حتى ترين القصة البيضاء. Don't be hasty. This is your period. Until you see the white. Until you see the white, don't be hasty. It lasts for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. No problem, sister. When it goes past the 15-day mark, altogether from the start of your period, now we say, okay, stop now. Too much, sister. Your break has been too much. Now you have to come back to the salah. But before that, it is what? It is what? It's period. So in the situations, one more time, are 3. With regards to that discharge that comes. The discharge which is called al-kudra wa sufra. Before the period, blood, it's not your period. Don't worry, sister. Keep praying, keep fasting until you see the period blood. The second type is when it comes after the period has started, before the period has ended, and the period ends through the qassatul bayda, through the white discharge or the clear discharge. We say if it happens before the white, you're still not on your period. It's happening for days. We say لا تعجلنا. لا تعجلنا عفوا. Don't be hasty. Don't be hasty, sister. Wait till you see it. Wait till you see it. Be patient. Okay, I've seen it. Third situation, after I've seen the white discharge, I might have even prayed, and then what? I saw the kudra and the sufra. I saw the brown or the yellowish discharge, or the pinkish or whatever have a discharge. We say, sister, now this discharge that you see, this is not your period. So then the discharge before the period and after the white is not considered period. Between the period blood and the white is considered period. I really want to know, sisters, are you happy right now? Have I explained it? Please just comment. Just let me know if I've explained it today for you. If today your stress has come to an end. There's always going to be some that are going to say, no, brother, I'm the other type. I'm in the other category. But for those who have this, please comment and let me know if it just became clear to you. Yes, Akhi.
For the 2 signs if a sister's menstrual stops, if either the white or clear discharge has come, or she's like tissue, then nothing has come out. How long does it have to be before you see, okay, nothing's come out?
Generally speaking, women know. Generally speaking, so the brother said, when the second way to know that period's ended is either through the discharge coming out, the white or clear discharge, or through what? It ending. He said, how long do you have to wait? I'm not going to go into the specifics of it. But generally speaking, women know, okay, my period's ended now. My period has ended. It's a complete end to a period. It's completely ended. Sometimes a woman might even see that there's no discharge coming for a day and it's ended, but then it starts on the second day or the third day. That's still her period. She knows that I'm still in my period. I'm still in my period. Does that make sense? She knows that I'm still in my period. Does that make sense? So that's why we said a complete end to the discharge. No bleeding, no yellow, no red, no white, no nothing. And it's complete. It's completely ended. And we say, sister, inshallah ta'ala, you are on your, you can do your ghusl now. Does that make sense? Yes, akhi.
What she do? She's colorblind.
She's colorblind. Brother, I don't know. Maybe she can marry you and show you. Huh? You're colorblind. You hope your wife's not in the shop. Allah about it. She's colorblind. I don't even know. That's another one. Okay. On the issue of the period, the last thing we need to mention. So she's now in a state of tahara. Her period's ended. What's the minimum? What? That she can be in a state of tahara for? And what's the maximum she can be in a state of tahara for? Sorry, let me repeat the question. Ignore that. Let's move on swiftly. Okay. Now we finish period. Now we finish what? Now we finish the period. Now we move on to an-nifas, which is the postnatal bleeding. This is the bleeding that comes after she had a child. Say again?
I'm not doing that.
What?
About how long is the tahara for?
She can be a tahara maximum 10 years, 20 years. There's no limit. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yes.
If the salat was about to end and her period just ended.
We're coming to it. So the brother asked a question. He said the salah time is about to come in and her period just ended. The salah time is about to finish and her period ended. What does she do? You know when we discussed this? In the times of the salah. We're coming to it. Every step of the way you pick up a bit of knowledge and you're like, 1 second, we're going to talk about period when it comes to what? In talaq, we talk about periods. You think, what's the relationship between talaq and periods? Don't worry, brother, there's a relationship between talaq and periods. Does that make sense? We're going to come to these things, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. The next thing is what? An-nifas, which is postnatal bleeding. The postnatal bleeding, the bleeding that comes after she's given birth. This is not the bleeding that comes out at the time of birth. That's called dam al-mutlaq. That's just blood. The baby's been born. And the baby's come out. And she carries on bleeding. This is called nifas. This is what? This is called nifas. Does that make sense? Okay. What's the minimum amount of time that this bleeding can last? A lahza, which means a moment. One time the blood just gushes out of her. And then she stops bleeding. Now she can go do her ghusl and she can pray. She can now do her ghusl and she can go in. She can go and pray. What's the maximum her postnatal bleeding can be? 60 days. Where she's bleeding for 61 days, we say the 61st day, sister, this is not called postnatal bleeding, this is not called nifas, this is called?
Regular.
This is called istihada, irregular bleeding. Any bleeding after the maximum limit of the period blood or the postnatal blood is considered istihada, irregular bleeding. So on the 60th day, when that day ends, she must go and do her ghusl and carry on praying. What's the majority of time that it lasts for women? What's the majority of time it lasts for women? About 40 days. Most women is about 40 days. Okay? Most women is about 40 days. Okay, now question is, what is haram for the woman to do when she's on her period? And what is haram for the woman to do when she's on her postnatal bleeding? Nifas and hayd. What is haram for her now? What is haram for her? The things that are haram are 5 things. The things that are haram are 5 things. The first thing is anything that was haram for the person in a state of janaba is haram for her as well. What is janaba? Sexual intercourse when you had it, or ejaculation. If you penetrated your spouse, both of you are now in a state of janaba. Or if either one of you ejaculated without penetration, then what? You are in a state of janaba. So you have to do ghusl, right? Remember we discussed there were things that were haram on that person now. What do we say is haram? We said that person cannot pray salah. If you're in a state of janaba, if you just had sexual intercourse or you ejaculated, you cannot pray your salah. You cannot do tawaf. You cannot touch the mushaf. You cannot carry the mushaf. Right? We said you cannot read the Quran. We said that what? You cannot read the Quran. And we also said that you cannot stay in the masjid. We said you cannot stay in the masjid. These are things that were haram on a person who's in a state of janaba. This is the madhab of the Shaafi'iyyah. Does that make sense? Okay. Because inshallah ta'ala this is something that really affects the sisters, I want to slightly just go into a difference of opinion. Very, very slightly inshallah ta'ala. And that is that we say that the women, wallahu a'lam, what seems to be a strong view is that even when they're on their menses, they can recite the Quran. They can recite the Quran. They can recite the Quran. Just don't touch the mushaf, sister, to be on the safe side. Read it from a phone, read it off by memory. And even the Shaafi'iyyah, they discuss, they say if a woman's going to forget the Quran, can she, even they say she's allowed to read it in that situation. Or for example, she's a Quran teacher and she's needed to teach the kids. If every month your Quran teacher for your child is taking a week off, the child's not going to learn. So even the Shaafi'iyyah have exceptions. It seems, wallahu a'lam, what the strongest view is that a woman can recite the Quran even though she's on her period. The second thing is that it seems that she can also stay inside the masjid even though she's on her period. Because the hadith that's used to say that a woman cannot, there's a woman called Jasra, which is in that hadith, and she's not considered authentic and strong. And there are many evidences where the Prophet ﷺ allowed women to stay in the masjid. For example, there was a woman, a tent was built for her inside of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and she stayed in the masjid for a very long time. And does a woman not on average come on her period every month? So it's not expected that she was on her period whilst in the masjid, and she was living in the masjid. And there are many evidences that the scholars use, and wallahi, the position is very strong to say that a woman can come to the masjid even on her period. And maybe inshallah ta'ala, if you guys want, I can give you a detailed answer with the dalil and the discussion of both sides next week if you guys are interested. It's a very interesting discussion. I did a research for it about 2 years ago, alhamdulillah, and I've got it and I can deliver it to you guys inshallah ta'ala. But it seems that the strongest view is that women on her period can come to the masjid. Condition: make sure that nothing's going to make the place of prayer dirty, that the blood's not going to leak. This was more of a concern back in the day. Now women, they have the undergarments, they have the pads and things like that, and they're able to quite comfortably protect the masjid from getting dirty with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a woman can do that, we say no problem, sister, come to the lessons, listen to the lesson, benefit from the lesson, even though you're in your period. So generally speaking, the rule is that the first thing that is haram on the woman on her menses or on her postnatal bleeding is everything that's haram on a person who is in a state of janaba. But we'll say here with the exception of reciting the Quran, sister, don't worry, and with the exception of being in the masjid, provided that you're what? That you can protect the place from being dirty. So that's the first thing that's haram. Anything that's haram on the person that's in a state of janaba, i.e. who just had sexual intercourse or ejaculated, except for those exceptions. The second thing is what? passing through the masjid. If she's going to make it, what? She's going to make it dirty. If she's going to make it dirty. Because what? This is connected to the previous one. Yeah? She can pass through the masjid, but she can't if she's going to make it dirty. So that's the second thing. Does that make sense? This doesn't apply to the junub, because the junub is not going to make it dirty, is he? Or the woman who's in a state of janab is not going to make it dirty. So that's why they bring it separately. They bring it separately. Because there's no blood coming out of them. Do you see? The third thing is fasting. The third thing is what? Fasting. A woman who is in a state of what? Her period or in her postnatal bleeding, she's not allowed to fast. Can she fast if she's in a state of janaba? Let's say it's Ramadan. Her and her husband and wife just had sexual intercourse. Fajr time kicked in, they haven't done ghusl. Can they fast? Huh? Yes, they can.
Yeah.
They can. They can fast. They can. Even though they haven't done tahara. So you can what? Fast when you haven't done what? When you haven't done what? Ghusl, if she's been on her period. And her period is what? Sorry. You can fast if you haven't done ghusl, if you just had sexual intercourse. Does that make sense? But if you're on your period, you can't fast. Pay attention. The salah, does she have to bring it back when she fasts? When she's on her period? What if she missed 25 prayers, 5 days? Or she missed what? 35 prayers, 7 days. Does she have to bring them back? She doesn't have to bring back even one prayer. It's the ease of the religion. Why? Because imagine a woman's on her period for 7 days, 8 days, and she's got to bring all those prayers back. It's very hard. But if she doesn't fast because of her period, she has to bring that fast back. Sisters, pay attention to something very serious. If you miss fasting in the month of Ramadan because of your period, you must make it up before the next Ramadan. You are a sinner. If you have not made that fast up before the next Ramadan. A lot of women have got days of fasting that they owe back to Allah Azza wa Jal because of their period. Ramadan to Ramadan, and she hasn't caught up. Do not let it. Any time between the ending of Ramadan and the start of the next, you can do it. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha used to make it up in the month of Sha'ban, which is the last month before Ramadan. She used to make them up then. But you must make it up before the end of the month. Okay, good. The fourth thing which is haram for the woman on her period or her postnatal bleeding is what? Al-istimta' bayna surrati wa rukbah. Is for her to be enjoyed between her navel and her knee. That means through sexual intercourse. Or even what? Through sexual intercourse. Yes? Does that make sense? Or through what? Touching her there. As in touching her there. But what about a woman's breasts? Can they be enjoyed? Yes. What about, for example, a woman's face and whatnot? Yeah, a man can enjoy his wife outside the navel and the knee. When she's on her period, you cannot what? Go to the navel and the knee. If you go to your wife and have intercourse with her while she's on her period, wallahi, this is fisq and fujur. This is a major sin. And a person has to do kafara. He can't just make tawbah. He has to pay things to get it off. And the ahadith on this are hugely strong. Does that make sense? A lot of people do this filth, wallahi. It's filthy, wallahi. Why is it that a man is not allowed to penetrate his wife in the back passage? Why is it that anal intercourse is haram? One of the primary reasons haram, the ulama mentioned, is because you're going to come in contact with filth. You're going into a place where there is what? Feces. So you're going to come in contact with filth. And the period is also najasa. Both are najasa. Both have impurities. So you're going into a place where there is najasa. This is filth. Does that make sense? And wallah is very strong. And inshallah ta'ala we'll come to that hadith and the warnings to it. It's very strong. Wallahi, the warning. Do not come to your wives when they're on their periods. Okay, what if her period's ended but she hasn't done ghusl? Make sure she does ghusl. Don't come near to your spouses until what? Until they what? Their period has stopped. Then Allah said, when He means don't come near, He means sexually. Don't come near to them through, between what? In their private parts. Does that make sense? فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ. But when they've done their ghusl, فَأْتُهُنْ. Go to them now. When they've done their ghusl, go to them now. Pay attention. Is this a command? That the woman her period is ended, she's done her ghusl. Allah commanded you to go and what? Go have intercourse with her. What is the ruling connected to the command? When you say a command, what does the command show?
Sorry, that's not a question.
Okay, just this first. What does a command show? General rule is that a command shows obligation. Allah said, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. Establish the prayer. Is that a command? So you have to establish the prayer. فَلْيَصُمْ. When you see the crescent, fast. Is that a command? So you have to fast. So now Allah commanded, when the woman does her ghusl, فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ فَأْتُهُنَّ. Go to her now. Have intercourse with her. Does that show it's obligatory for you to go and have intercourse with your wife after she's done her ghusl? Some of the scholars said this is a sign that a man has to go and have intercourse with his wife after her period ends, she's done ghusl. He has to. This is the view of Ibn Hazm. He was a Zahiri, which means that, they just took what was the apparent and they just took it like that. The strongest view is not obligatory. It's not obligatory. It's not obligatory. Give her maybe a bit of a rest. She just done her ghusl. She just washed her hair, let it dry. Maybe give her a day or something and come to her. Does that make sense? I mean, it's up to you. You can go to her straight away if you want. She has to obey you. But the point of the matter is what? That it doesn't show that. Because, and there's a reason why it doesn't show it, which I don't want to go into. It's usul al-fiqh. There's different types of commands, and this is not the command that shows obligation. Does that make sense? Sorry if I confused you. The fifth thing that's haram on the woman, that is what? In her menses. And also, the one who's on her menses, is what? That she's not allowed to be divorced. A woman is not allowed to be divorced on her menses. She's not allowed to be divorced on her menses. Okay, pay attention. Do you have to wait for her to do ghusl before you can have intercourse with her? Yes. Do you have to wait for her to do ghusl before you divorce her? No. So then the moment she sees the white, that's going to be a sad day for her. If it's divorce day, I'm just saying. Sees the white, then you can. Divorce is not a joke. Obviously, it's not something you should take lightly. Don't do it. I'm just making a point. Sometimes I like to just be a bit animated with the lessons because it can get complicated, it can get dry, so that's why I make these jokes, just so you guys can stay clued up. But divorce is not a joke, okay? It's allowed, but it's something that you only do when the building is burning. I know Masjid Furqan is a bit different, we use the fire exit every day, but generally speaking, the fire exit is only used when the building is burning. Does that make sense? Divorce is a fire exit, only when the building is burning. Anyway, when the woman is on her period, you can't divorce her. Pay attention, if you divorce her on her period, are you a sinner? Yes. But does the divorce take place? We will come to it. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll come to it. Does that make sense? We will come to it. So yes.
So if she's undergoing the process of bleeding, you can't divorce her.
Allah alam. I need to double check that, so I kept quiet. Okay, what's the difference between her? So we see there's a lot of similarities between postnatal bleeding and her menses. There's a lot of similarities. What's the difference? One of the differences is that the menses are a sign of you reaching puberty and the postnatal bleeding is not a sign of reaching puberty. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So we said at the beginning, how many types of bleeding are there for women? 3. The period blood, the postnatal blood, i.e. hayd, nifas. Then we said there's a third type of blood, which is what? Al-istihadha. Istihadha is what? Is irregular bleeding. Very quickly, irregular bleeding is bleeding that is outside of her menstrual cycle. Okay, she can still pray. She can still pray with it. All she has to do is do ghusl before. So for example, if she prayed and then she had this irregular bleeding, her wudu broke. Her wudu broke. So now go and clean the area. Go and do what? Your wudu again and pray. And pray. If she has this irregular bleeding and it stays there, pray straight away. As soon as you've done the wudu, pray. To decrease the chance of what? To decrease the chance of what? The bleeding coming before you've prayed. And remember all that we discussed when we talked about the conditions of wudu, and we talked about the special conditions for the one who might have a medical situation, for the one who urine keeps coming out of them or they keep passing wind. This falls under that as well, istihada. So istihada is not period blood. It's not postnatal blood. You can pray with it. You don't have to do ghusl. You just do what? Wudu, just wipe it, clean it, and you do wudu. This one, istihada, is the mad one. This is the mad one. Because what if her irregular bleeding and period bleeding is mixed? And you can't tell the difference between the two. Mutahayyara wallahi. The confusing one. This one, inshallah, we leave it inshallah ta'ala for the future if Allah Azza wa Jalla gives us life.